Ruto bought the church, literally.
Kanisa tusikae mbali safari hii na siasa ya Kenya.
Mwambie Ruto usiwe na wasiwasi. Mbingu inapata unabii.
There goes. Help me appreciate excellencies at day.
Kenya is a God-fearing country, from president to men of God to common citizens.
No matter how much Mheshimiwa has tried to put him together, there is a God who is bigger than him, who works inside him, and who...
But this statement has since become more of a sarcasm. Before we delve into this story, let's lay some perspective first. As of 2019, the government of Kenya reported that 85.5% of its populations are Christians, split among various denominations, mostly falling in either the Pentecostal or mainline churches. I grew up in church, and while I don't deny the existence of God, something is definitely wrong with the most Kenyan churches today. We were taught to respect men of God, instilling a fear that some questions were not supposed to be asked about the so-called men of God, and the only thing we were taught to do is to pay allegiance to everything they say. This mindset has roots in colonial period, because when missionaries came with the Bible, it was written in a foreign language, and high percentage of our ancestors then did not understand, and so it had to be translated to them, which made them to fully depend on the men of God. But today, for example, Kenya literacy rate as at 2022 was 82.88%. So out of 10 people, at least 8 can read and write. Therefore, reading and correctly interpreting the Bible should not be a problem to most people. It's only that pastors have always argued that interpreting the Bible should be something spiritual, which is complicating the whole issue even more, because it's so hard to know who is spiritual and who is not. Despite Kenya literacy rates being high, according to Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, about 38% of Kenya population lived in poverty by 2021, most of which depend on churches for hope. By this virtue, pastors have a big influence and following in the society. Some believe they are sent by God and they can give solution to the problem they are going through and connecting them with God. But this has since been a mirage. The same way the colonialists used the Bible to take our lands and wealth, our own pastors are manipulating the poor congregants. Most people are desperate to find answers from God, with ungodly pastors laying traps. The most recent case in Kenya is the Pastor Mackenzie's story, who persuaded his congregation to fast to death, claiming over 400 lives and still counting, as the government continues to exhume more bodies as at July 2024. And he is not alone. A larger portion of Kenyan church just seems to have lost it. In 2022, some powerful pastors greatly influenced the outcome of national elections, which has now led to many Kenyans suffering and regretting participating in such an important activity. Most pastors associated themselves with the then presidential candidate William Ruto, who they portrayed as a savior who came to rescue Kenyans from the suffering they were going through. Most pastors told Kenyans how God had shown them visions about who he chose as president, but most of these were entirely not true. Some of them were just chasing a money bag. 2022 campaign were active in churches, with many so-called houses of God turning into campaign arenas, with politicians hurling insults at each other on pulpits as congregants cheer at them, and pastors receiving big money in church harambees to build churches and attract more money. Most churches took advantage of this chance, and big structures called the houses of God were erected as a result. As this pastor reveals, most pastors were promised to gain large.
A few pastors, not all, were actually, promised heaven if they helped Ruto to get into office. Some of them were given money. They would flock to Karen. That's an open secret, no longer a secret. So Ruto bought the church, literally. He would go to a particular church and promise, to build a church for them, or repair something, or buy them a bus, or, those kinds of things.
Not the church alone. Even the less privileged resonated so well with Ruto's manifestos, using wheelbarrow and promising mama mbogas and watu wa boda boda that they will form a government, a hustler nation, a promise that has now turned bitter.
Die one day. Our prayer, we were not voting for you to come and finish us. Umetumaliza na njia zote Ruto. Umetumaliza kibiashara. Umetumaliza na kila kitu. Watoto wetu hawasomi. Tunakuja hapa hospitali. NHF umetumalizia.
Fast forward to 2023, the euphoria of Ruto's victory began fading. The promised hustler nation seemed like a distant dream. Instead of prosperity, Kenya is grieving in soaring cost of living and the widening gap between the rich and the poor. The people who believed in Ruto's message feel betrayed, see their hope for a better life slipping away and their right to be hungry.
Ruto, wakati alikuja, akatuambia photo map. Photo map ni mama mboga. Photo map iko wapi? Na mbona ametuaja tukalewa kwa sababu yake? Wacha tulewe. Tulewe basi.
Nimesikia hata uchungu mwingi sana wakati hii. Afadhali mungenipeleka pale kwa mili ya watoto ya mama. Watoto ya Rito wamekufa. Mnasuia wabunge 28, mnaua watoto 500. Hiyo moyo nani atalipa? Ama damu ijatosha kukunywa na Ruto duniani? Hajatosha damu. Alitumaliza Eldoret. Mimi ni mmoja wa kumalizwa Eldoret. Tena anatufuata mpaka huku.
He needs to stop land grabbing in this country. He needs also to respect some of us who campaigned and worked for him and who pray for him and still work.
Bad fingers has pointed to President Ruto since ascending to power. A political coalition once portrayed as a guardian angel turned into a government of revenge and humanity, a spreading such among other many incidences.
Mali ya Mkenya ikivamiwa, hata hizo mashamba zenyu tutazivamia, na wenye hawana mashamba wapate mashamba Kenya hii. Msifikiri ati wananchi wa kawaida ndio watapoteza mali. Even you will pay a price.
Na nimeambia mambo ni mangapi? Matatu. Wakitaka kuniletea kisirani, either wahame Kenya, ama nitawaweka jela, ama wasafiri waende mbinguni.
The Gen Zs felt tired. They decided to face the president head on. The protests were all over the country. Many protesters went through abductions and torture, and the government only accepted to listen to the young people after over 40 lives were lost. The Nairobi senator in one of his interviews said this.
So you see what happens right now. William Ruto basically has taken over parliament, that every single thing that he sends to parliament, even if it is against the interests of the same members of parliament and their people. You have seen the examples of the finance bill. In the Senate, we had a spectacle that senators are being told to vote for less amount of money to go to their own counties. And they actually just vote the way the president has said. Now, after the success that he achieved with putting parliament in his pocket, he has now fixed his eyes on the judiciary.
This was clearly portrayed during the finance bill, when the same MPs who voted for the finance bill were clapping when the president withdrew the same bill they were supporting. In all this, the church is silent, still silenced by the greed and promises given to them by the government, while they slowly lose trust in the people that once believed and trusted in them for spiritual guidance. They got to bed with the government and never criticize anything that the government does wrong. The State House has become heaven to them, so keen not to shut the tap that has continued to flow them with money. As the congregation, mostly the poor and the vulnerable, suffers, they continue to give them hope that one day the wolves will stop eating the sheep, that Kenyans should live within their means as the political class and some men of God continues to live large. Most Kenya pastors appear to be increasingly embroiled in public disputes and questionable activities.
I wish mnanijua. Ni adirani kubishana huku na Kenya 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 Prince, Kenya Prince watu walinunua gari juzi.
Ezekiel hataua watu Kitale. Ezekiel hatavuna mioyo Kitale. Ezekiel hataharibia watu Kitale. Ezekiel hataharibu hatima za watu Kitale. Miungu zake tumezima. Miungu yake
And let's wait to see if the church in Kenya will ever gain sanity.